market valuation technique. Now, to do this technique, obviously, you need a market for the resource that you are interested in estimating the value for. Right? If the resource, let's say air, that it is what you're trying to value, but there's no market for air, then the market valuation technique will not work. Okay, so let's say we want to answer this question: what is the value of the U.S. forest? Okay, so here's the link for where I got most of these information. Right? And so one method or one way of using the market valuation technique is to look at the value of timber sales and manufacturing. And so what's the value? What is the market value of all the products that come from harvesting of timber? Okay, and so this will be an example of the market valuation technique. Right? Right. Okay, and this is pretty straightforward because all you have to do is look at the revenue, right, of the industry. Okay, so for example, let's take a look at California. So California, right, the annual revenue from timber related products is 15 to 22 billion dollars. Okay, and now, so let's say we're trying to use this to answer the question: how much is each acre of the U.S. forest worth? Right, you can simply take that value and divided by what's the how many acres there are, how many timberland there are in California, and so here it will be a number that you could come up with. So you can say then, right, each acre is worth $1,265. Okay, all right. So that is a value. That is a market valuation technique, and you can also, right, say you don't want to include furnitures, but you can just say raw material, right? So direct timber, right, before processing, right, and that is a choice also, and obviously you will get a much smaller number in terms of dollar figures if you choose to exclude any of the value added products afterwards. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, so one thing you want to, let's think about this. Right? Is this a direct use value or an indirect use value? Okay. This is the direct use value only. Okay, because we're talking about, right, the timber that people that you can extract from the forest. So more for market valuation technique, okay, generally speaking, direct use value is very convenient. So yes, and because there's a market for goods and services produced from the resource. So both consumers and producers benefit from the resource directly. Now, can you use market valuation technique to try to value indirect use values? So things like, and just a quick refresher, right? When we say indirect use values, we're talking about ecosystem services like carbon sequestration and flood protection, right, and so on. So can we use the market valuation technique to estimate those values? Not likely, right? It will possibly, but it will be very difficult. And the reason, because there's no market existing, right, for most indirect ecological services, right? Soil erosion control, water treatment, carbon sequestration, and so on. Okay, so then if you want to you want to estimate the indirect use values of a resource, you have to find a different technique. Okay. Now, the second method is the cost of illness method. Okay, in other words, what is the damage? All right. So these are monetary, direct and indirect costs. Now, this is the point of confusion here. When we say direct and indirect costs, it is not related to direct and indirect use values. Okay, unfortunately, we're putting these words in the same chapter. It gets a little confusing. So direct and indirect costs, we'll talk about what that is in a moment. Okay, but don't confuse this with direct and indirect use value. Okay, all right. So what is the cost of illness method? Right. So for example, I want to value clean air. Right. What is the value of clean air? Okay, so the cost of illness method, think of it this way. Well, what happens when you don't have clean air, right? What is the cost of the damage for lack of clean air? And if we can estimate that, then we can use that as an estimate for the value of clean air. Okay. So direct cost, right, in terms of cost of illness method, is the medical costs and the lost wages. Now, these will be easier to estimate for obvious reasons because the hospital will give you a bill if you are sick. Let's say if you are because of pollution, you are sick, you go to the hospital, you get a medical bill. Right? If you are sick due to pollution and you can't go to work, you have lost wages. So that is what we call direct costs. Right? These are you suffer monetarily uh, due to the pollution itself. Indirect costs, much harder to estimate. First, we have decrease in human capital. Now this, for example, so this, right, it means that your capacity to perform is actually decreased due to the pollution. So it is an example of this will be mercury poisoning in the water. Right? Let's say if you're as a kid, you might have or this happened to children, right? That they're poisoned, a mercury poison in the water, and therefore their ability to perform work, right? They cannot reach their full potential. Okay? Or you are you became handicapped due to the poisoning. Therefore, your ability, your earning potentials decreased. Okay, so that is the indirect cost. Pain and suffering. So this is what I think most people understand what this is, right? So due to the pollution, you simply, right, you are suffering, it's painful, you don't like it, it makes you depressed, right? That is pain and suffering. Impacts to efficiency. Now this is the different than decrease in human capital. Impact to efficiency is, for example, if there is pollution, then you can't go to the office because the air quality is too hazardous. So you have to work from home, and or you can't work as long. So let's say that you can't, because of the air pollution, you cannot work for long periods of time. You have to take breaks, right? And so there's a decrease in efficiency of your work. Okay, but you're not handicapped. You're not suffering directly from the pollution. So that is what we mean by impact to efficiency. Okay, so here's a case study that is presented in your book. Right, cost of asthma in the United States was estimated to be about $56 billion per year. Okay, and this is the four categories that study used. Right? Now, do they have to choose these four? No, right? They could easily try to find other variables to measure. Okay, and so again, this is like when there is no correct one here, right? These are just really tools, right? So you want to think of yourself as, put your mindset of a lawyer. You're trying to argue, right? You're trying to argue a case, and so it really depends on who the jury is, right? And who is the audience is, and what's going to make the best case for you, right? All right. Third one, replacement cost method. Okay, how much to replace? So this, right, is very useful to estimate ecosystem services. Okay, and the basic idea is very simple. Is to say, look, we benefit from the environment because of all the services that the environment, the ecosystem provides for us. Suppose that we don't have them, and suppose that we had to build, right, build these services ourselves and provide these services, right, ourselves. How much would that cost? Okay, and we will use that number to try to as an estimate for the value of these ecosystem services. All right, so let's take, right, a forest, for example. So some of the services that a forest could provide is erosion control, flood protection, and water quality control. Right? And so with the replacement cost method, to estimate these services, right? Some of the question we could say is, how much would it cost to replace these benefits, right? So, for example, so these are the three things that the forest provides for us, and so we're going to use these. So these are things that we're trying to value. Okay, and then we'll simply obtain estimates. Okay, so erosion control. Well, we can build a retaining wall. Flood protection. Well, we can build our own levee. Okay, water quality control. Okay, well, let's build our own water treatment plant. Okay, and again, these are all hypothetical. It's just simply using existing construction technology to try to estimate how much would it cost to actually build these things. By the way, I made up these numbers. I have no idea how much it will cost to build a water treatment plant. Okay, probably a lot more than $35 million. All right. All right. So, what types of values are these ecosystem services? Right? So, again, remember, right? These are indirect use values. Right? because we are not, right, because we are indirectly benefit from the forest. These are not services that one obtains by going into the forest. You benefit from you benefit from in proxy or even away, right, from the forest. Can the replacement cost method be used to estimate direct use values? Okay, possibly, but it would be very difficult. Right? So imagine, right, if we want to use this method, let's say for hiking, right? Let's say hiking is a very valuable activity for you, right? And if you were to use the replacement cost method, right, to estimate the value of hiking for a forest, well, then the only way to really do this is to try to estimate how much would it cost to rebuild a forest for you to hike in. Right? Not a very not a very reasonable estimate, right? So no, so it'd be very difficult, and so there these are, so for direct use values, market valuation is typically better, or we'll talk in a moment. A reveal preference method is typically better. Okay, all right. Next one, reveal preference method.